everybody, welcome to your next video lecture for digital communication. This week, we are going to focus on the question, how can digital communication both help and hurt our interpersonal relationships? So we're going to do this by really focusing on both of those elements separately. We're going to first look at ways that digital communication can hurt our relationships, some kind of big communication problems that exist. And then we're going to focus on how digital communication can help our relationships. So we want to make sure we look at both sides of that coin because remember, it's a social shaping approach. It's both how we use it and how it affects us. And then last, we're going to unpack our final big idea for the semester, Sherry Turkle's Alone Together theory, which really is going to kind of bring a lot of what you guys have been saying to a nice kind of bow on top of it. So let's go ahead and get started by identifying how digital communication can hurt our interpersonal relationships. The first thing that we're really going to talk about is how there is like a difference in the emotional connection that we can develop. So this is something that you guys have said frequently throughout the semester, that one of the issues with digital communication is that you don't feel like you gain those nonverbal cues that allow us to build emotional connections. And that is something that we need to be aware of, right? That there is going to be a difference in that and how that functions. We also know that there's an increased number of misunderstandings online. And this is not necessarily unique to online environments. There are misunderstandings in person as well, but these misunderstandings online are often going to be more interpretively based because you're not there to gain the clarity on the message that you're seeking. And so online, if I interpret the words one way, I'm going to perceive them that way until I'm told otherwise, and there's no one there to tell me otherwise. We also have issues with trust and privacy. So when we thought about blockchain and the metaverse and all of those new technologies under the future internet, one of the big concerns that you guys raised is what does that mean for privacy? Who can gain access to my information? And so even when we're talking about systems that are supposed to be very, very safe, there's still this lack of trust in online entities because of how many problems within society have existed. We often talk about online scammers, online hackers. We don't talk about in-person scams in the same way because, again, they're so much more isolated. We also have increased distance and loneliness. One of the things Sherry Turkle is going to talk about is that in our quests to be online all of the time, we're actually increasing our loneliness because we're only giving ourselves kind of superficial relationships and we're not closing that psychological distance. We're not creating that sense of presence. We also have timing and response expectations. I know a lot of people who get very upset if somebody doesn't respond to their message based on their expected standard. And when I ask them, well, does that person know what your standard or expectation is? They often have to say no, because that expectation has not been communicated to the other person. Right? I am a person that is so terrible at answering video messages on Snapchat. Those messages go unread for days because I don't ever just sit down and watch videos. That's not a part of my normal routine. And so that response expectation had to be communicated to those interactants so they knew I wasn't ignoring them. I'm still looking at your picture messages. I just can't process the videos right now. We also have issues related to tone and clarity. This is going to come from sometimes the directness of online communication mixed with its more informal nature. One of the kind of paradoxical things that exists is that on our device, we are expected to be both personal and professional. We have to carry on our relationships and we have to do our job. And so we have to blend those two different kinds of communication together. That's where that adaptability becomes so crucial moving forward. We also have differences in conflict management. I have a friend who did some research on people are more prone to pick fights online because they know there are different ways to get out of it. I can go onto some sites, start fighting and trolling with people, and when I get bored of it, I can swipe them, and they're no longer part of my normal interactions. And so it's changing the way that people engage in conflict, which is changing the way we engage in conflict management. We also have issues related to authenticity and idealization. Remember Bethany in Jumanji, Welcome to the Jungle? She literally positions herself perfectly and then captions it, "I just woke up like this." That is not an accurate statement. She's giving off this perception of idealization when it's not actually her authentic self. We also have the lack of immediate feedback. Online communication, one of the biggest differences is that feedback loop is not happening in real time. And because of that, if I need some kind of response, I am at somebody else's mercy. This is why one of the main rules of online communication is that if you receive a message, you should somehow respond to that message to indicate that you've received it, right? I have people where I'll tell them, "I've received this. I want to give you an in-depth response, and I can't right now. I will get back to this," right? But at least acknowledging that I've received it is very helpful. We also have the over-reliance on text communication. So online, digital communication, we have to type it out, right? "How am I feeling?" has to get typed out. There's an over-reliance on those digital kind of written forms of communication. We also have differences in ability or preferences, right? My mom does not have the same abilities in technology that I do, and she does not have the same preferences for use that I do. And so it's a lot of adapting to meet the standards of the individual we're communicating with. Textisms are also going to be really important. In that over-reliance on text-based communication, the use of textisms has become very popular. But one thing that's happening is society is shaping the meaning of these textisms. So K period has a meaning now that it didn't have before. We also have the problem of technology accessibility barriers. Not everybody has access to high-speed Wi-Fi or bandwidth or the latest device. And because of that, we have less people being able to connect in all the same ways. The last thing is identity management. This does pose a problem because I'm fragmenting myself into so many different pieces. So when we look at this plethora of online problems that exist in communication, we can really kind of synthesize it into three main categories. We have the overall miscommunication that occurs. This is because it's very difficult to convey tone or emotion. We have the over-reliance, which actually leads to issues like Zoom fatigue and more isolation. And then we have issues related to privacy and security, where it's all about how we're sharing that sensitive information and our desire for secure platforms. Now that we've identified how digital communication can hurt our relationships, let's look more at how it helps our relationships. This obviously should say communication opportunities online, but we're going to do the same thing. Let's walk through a few of these opportunities. We actually have increased accessibility and inclusion. So people who have mobility issues, people who have cognitive issues, they are able to gain access through technology to a world they wouldn't have had access to before. I think about my fiance and the alpha-gal diagnosis, and technology has given me access to a social network that I didn't have access to before. We also have flexible timing and asynchronous options. Why are you taking an online course if not for the flexibility, right? That is something we like. That is an opportunity that comes from online communication that we can't necessarily get in person, right? In-person classes, you are beholden to my schedule. Online, you can do your work at 2 a.m. and nobody can say anything about it. We also have expanded networks. I'm able to connect with a broader range of people that includes niche communities. I can connect with my MCU fans, my Shit Creek fans. I can connect with other people who are teaching communication. I can connect with all my networks back in North Dakota. So I have an expanded ability to maintain my network. Remember, think about high school reunions pre-social media and how difficult it was for them to get back together because they didn't have the ability to contact one another. We also have the support for identity exploration. I am able online to explore my identity. There's a lot of articles and research that talks about, for instance, LGBT individuals who are able to go into some of those more LGBT friendly spaces, especially if they come from, rural areas that are not as LGBT friendly, and they're able to seek out those types of relationships and fill that part of their cup while also exploring their own identity. They get to control how they're being perceived and how much they're disclosing to people in a safer environment. We also have enhanced expression, things like memes. Think about the idea that I can send a meme now that kind of encapsulate an entire meaning and sends it to you, and you're able to interpret that. That is enhanced expression. We didn't have that before. Yeah, we could draw pictures, we could use photographs, but even that's all communication technology, right? And so there is an enhanced level of expression. We also have opportunities for reflection and editing. I had over a couple weekends ago, I had kind of a moment of rage when I realized how many students weren't doing the work that I wanted them to be doing. And I right away wanted to be very, very angry about it. But because I had opportunity for reflection, I was able to edit my message and send something that was going to be more sensitive and actually diagnose the larger problem. We also have enhanced record keeping and documentation. My Facebook is literally 20 years of my life at this point. I can look at that and I have a perfectly curated timeline of everything that I've gone through, right? And that's kind of one of the reasons people have an issue getting rid of social media now is this increased documentation. I don't need to create a scrapbook. Social media is my scrapbook. We also can overcome physical barriers. People who have, again, mobility issues are able to overcome some of those using digital technology. People with social anxiety are able to overcome some of those because of digital technology. Again, they could gain access to groups they didn't have access to before. We also have enhanced innovation. This is huge, guys. The fact that we have digital communication technologies means that we can all use them and be more innovative in how we're using them. Again, social shaping approach. We have global connectivity. Remember, we are a global village now. We are all connected in the way that we understand and operate within the world. We can no longer separate ourselves from others. And so by giving into that opportunity for global connectivity, we actually gain intercultural competence. And then we have real-time connection. As much as there's asynchronous options, we can still do video chats, we can call, all of those things that can mimic face-to-face interaction still get the job done because there are benefits to this, right? There are benefits that come from digital technology. One of the first ones is that we really can break down barriers of all kinds. It's enabling global opportunities and connections for all kinds of people. Right? And that's huge. This is where the inclusion is really coming from. It's not necessarily that jobs and industries are seeking out all these really diverse candidates. It's that because of digital technology, we now have access to those opportunities that we didn't have access to before. We also have enhanced speed and convenience. There is instant messaging. There is real-time communication. As much as we want to say there's not. And last, we have increased accessibility. This is going to be that more people can reach out and gain community, they can gain identity, they can gain relationships in these virtual environments. I want us to come back for a second to the idea of media richness, right? This idea that we can do all of this by matching the type of communication technology to the message that we're trying to send. So some channels are better than others. We go way back to week 2 for this, right? One of the very first communication concepts that we introduced was this idea of media richness, this idea that sometimes some channels of communication just offer more social cues. And with that message, we should select channels of communication that meet the demands of our task. If we're trying to do something simple, we can probably use leaner channels. If we're trying to do something more complex, our channels should be richer. This aligns really well to the idea of social presence. Remember, Walther critiques both media richness and social presence as cues filtered out approaches. So they're only looking at these things in comparison to face-to-face communication. Notice that face-to-face is the richest medium in both ideas, in both theories. Social presence, that idea of psychological closeness, that's also known as perceived immediacy. This is a variable that I use a lot. But one of the things that we've learned this semester is that we need to approach things from a more social information processing perspective, where it's not that these technologies are inherently deficient, it's that these technologies are different, and we must understand those differences in order to utilize them effectively. But that does not mean all technology is sunshine and rainbows. And for the last thing that I want to look at in this lecture is the alone together theory that's coming from Sherry Turkle. Let's go ahead and unpack this, because this is going to be the supplemental video that you get to watch this week. One of Sherry Turkle's primary arguments is that we're actually expecting more from technology and less from each other. And this is going to be her big premise, that as we use technology, as we design technologies, we're actually only doing so in the ways that give us the illusion of companionship without the actual demands of any friendships or relationships. And so what she's saying is that because of the way we've designed technology, remember social shaping, the way we use it as much as the way it shapes us, okay, we do so in a way that gives us little bite-sized pieces of interpersonal relationships. And a lot of people would say, can't I just fill my interpersonal cup with a lot of little interactions with a lot of people rather than meaningful interactions with some people? And I'm here to tell you, you cannot. Right? During the summer, I don't have nearly the same interactions with students. And so my level of interpersonal communication is deeply diminished. And as much as I engage in a lot of email communication, it doesn't fill my cup in the same way that sitting down with a student for 20 minutes might. And so we're actually losing the ability to have real conversation with people, and we're less comfortable being alone by ourselves. We're so used to needing to be alone together. And so she actually gives us 3 big takeaways. First, she really talks about the Goldilocks effect, that one of the things we're doing is we want our relationships that are just right. They can't be too close interpersonally where we're having to disclose too much, but they can't be too far away where we're not feeling some kind of interpersonal satisfaction. Okay. And what she's saying is that technology is allowing us to do this, where we're actually not showing people our true self. Okay, we're editing ourselves down to these picture-perfect ideas, which is allowing us to avoid vulnerability, but then we're never actually building closeness with people because we're never doing the thing that allows us to build closeness. We're not actually communicating, right? Communication is the key to community. It's the key to common ground. And we're not doing that if we're controlling our communication, if we're controlling our images so that we don't actually come across as authentic. The next thing she would argue is that we're very, very connected, right? My technology makes me very, very connected. I have 1,600 friends on Facebook, right? That's not a brag. That's the number that I have because I've had it for 20 years. So we are super, super connected, but we turn to our phones when we feel lonely rather than an actual person, okay? And our phone is only going to offer us surface level comfort. We're going through and we're liking a lot of posts, or we're looking at a lot of posts where we're being people's inactive audiences, right? But that doesn't actually fill our cup. What Sherry Turkle is arguing is that we're losing the ability to be present and to sit with ourselves. So I want you to try and experiment with me. If you are listening to this video on anything other than regular speed, please at this time turn it to regular speed because we are going to sit with ourselves for 60 seconds. And I want you to just be in your mind. Don't look at your phone. I'm going to mute my camera. Okay, we just need to exist for a moment and see how we feel with it, okay? 60 seconds, I will see you on the other side. Everybody, start now. All right, that was 60 seconds. For some of us, that might have proven very difficult. I wasn't even actually able to engage in my own mind because I was so busy watching the timer. That's how difficult it can be to just sit with our thoughts. And Sherry Turkle would argue we're really, really bad at that now. We can't be alone, so instead we turn to our phones, but that's not actually giving us the connection we seek. And so her solution, Sherry Turkle would urge us to reclaim conversation. We need to put down our devices and we need to rebuild the meaningful, messy, in-person conversations that are necessary to build that community. So instead of turning to our phones, we should embrace solitude and we should embrace dialogue. Those are both going to be essential to build empathy, to build connection, and to cultivate a level of self-awareness. Because after all, as Turkle would say, if we don't teach our children to be alone, they'll only ever know how to be lonely. And that's huge. That is the call that Sherry Turkle is urging all of us to pick up, that we need to reclaim conversation. Not all of our communication can be through our phone. That doesn't mean we can dismiss the opportunities that exist, but we do need to embrace those face-to-face interactions and to gain that closeness that so many of us cherish and long for. This has been everything in the next video lecture. In this lecture, we talked about how digital communication can hurt our relationships, how digital communication can help our relationships, and last, we unpacked the alone together theory from Sherry Turkle. All of this should have helped us answer our big question this week: how can digital technology both help and hurt our relationships? That has been everything for this lecture in digital communication. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out. And if not, I look forward to our next conversation. Take care, everybody.